RPGs are a genre that have been sorely underrepresented on my channel, and the Final Fantasy series in particular, because not only did it introduce me to the wide world of great, huge, big RPG epic adventures, but it's also one of my favorite game series of all time. And it's just a little sad that I've reviewed exactly one Final Fantasy game over the lifetime of my channel. To give you an idea of how much this series means to me, I was a hardcore Nintendo fan kid during the Super Nintendo era. Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI pulled me into the RPG vortex. I started gravitating towards that genre, and when Final Fantasy VII was announced for the PlayStation, I lost almost all interest in the Nintendo 64 and became a supporter of Sony's new console. My PlayStation collection was almost all Final Fantasy games and RPGs, with the random Mega Man games stuck in there. I haven't covered Final Fantasy on this channel for pretty much two reasons. And the first reason is that the length of the games is a lot longer than the other stuff that I typically cover. It's a lot easier to justify playing through Mega Man or a Mario game that only takes a little bit to record and only a little bit of space on my computer, where a Final Fantasy game will take 40 hours and like hundreds of gigabytes of files. It's just easier to get a video out on a smaller game than a game like a Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy Tactics. The second reason is, by the time I started doing this channel, I'd kind of become burnt out on the JRPG formula. Fighting via menus and the whole random battle thing was just kind of tired, and I was a little sick of it. But now with the renewed energy that I have to put into this channel, I figured it's time to take a look at some of those games that I love. So instead of starting with a numbered game like Final Fantasy VI or VII, we're going to start with one of the best spin-offs and probably one of the best games in the series, Final Fantasy Tactics. Final Fantasy Tactics is a tactical RPG that was created by yada yada yada. You know what? You can get all this information somewhere else. I don't really feel like going into all the factual stuff that reviews normally come with. If you want to know the names of the people involved, look them up or check out another video. Let's start that again. Final Fantasy Tactics is a tactical RPG that is super fun to play. Yeah, addictive, sucks you in. Man, how do you review again? I like this game. It's good. Play it. Okay, let's start with the story. When I was in middle school, Final Fantasy Tactics was released around my birthday. I remember having birthday money and asking my mom to take me to Best Buy so I could pick it up. I also remember it only being $40, where most of the big title games at the time were around $50. I took it home and promptly put it in my PS1 to play, but it was a school night and I had homework. So I only got to play the intro battle. I saved the game and had to wait to pick it back up the next night. Also, I probably didn't do my homework. I was a terrible student. The first thing that struck me about this game was the fact that the exploration I was used to in previous Final Fantasies was stripped from this game. I couldn't walk around towns, talk to NPCs that weren't a shop owner or bartenders, and all my overworld movement was done on a map. This was a little jarring to me at the time, but I quickly got used to it and fell in love with the game. The second thing that struck me? The narrative. Final Fantasy Tactics tells a story full of political intrigue and magical conspiracies. I say magical conspiracies because, well, people don't normally turn into holy monsters with a shiny stone. And those people monsters are the ones trying to take over the kingdom by manipulating a civil war between two different noble families. As the main protagonist, Ramza Belv, man, how do you say that? A young aristocrat, you are trying to stop the civil war and those pulling the strings. They say they want to have the nobles fight and kill each other for the benefit of the common man, but Ramza says that it goes too far and too many innocents are at stake. All while this is happening, Ramza's childhood friend, Delita, a commoner that was taken in by Ramza's family, is somehow also manipulating everyone he comes into contact with to ascend to the throne himself. The story can actually get pretty confusing, and the translation of the port that I'm playing on the PS1, it doesn't help. The localization of this game wasn't terribly done, at least in the most important places, but it can still make for some confusing dialogue at key points that make it hard to understand where the story is going. In other non-quite as important places, it can just be downright bad to the point of being funny. At the time this game was released, this story seemed way more epic than just about anything else I'd played up until that point. Yes, including Final Fantasy VII. This game has a deep and twisted story, and looking back, maybe not as great as some of the other Final Fantasy games, but it's still dang good. If you want to get around the spotty translation, give it a go on the PSP or a mobile device instead. The retranslation of The War of the Lions and the included animated fully voiced cutscenes is worth it alone, and we'll get more into those ports a bit later. So you may ask yourself, Brasel, why didn't you say the first thing that stuck out to you was the completely different battle system? And I'd say, you're probably smart enough to have already known that I was going to get into that. I actually had seen tactics in a GamePro or some other magazine before I had decided to buy it, so I kinda already knew what I was getting myself into. So, I noticed it alright, it just wasn't a big surprise. The battle system is more strategy than traditional turn-based RPG, and while this genre of game had been popular on the last generation of home consoles, particularly in Japan, I hadn't really taken much notice of it until my favorite RPG series decided to try it out. Your characters and your enemies battle each other to the death on a nice, detailed, grid-based map. Everyone on the map takes turn moving depending on their CT gauge and their speed stat. The better the speed stat, the faster the CT gauge fills. Having the ability to take a turn before your enemy is incredibly beneficial, so grabbing speed-enhancing equipment helps a ton, but you don't tend to see such equipment until a bit later in the game. There are human units and monster units. Human units are all bound to a very familiar job system. You have knights, mages, ninjas, thieves, and all sorts of other traditional Final Fantasy type job units. Every successful action a human unit takes grants them experience and job points. Experience points go towards the overall level of that unit, and the job points are a currency used to learn different abilities. Monster units don't have a job system and all pretty much have their own innate abilities. Chocobos have really good movement, skeletons and ghosts are undead, goblins are pretty weak, etc. You can actually recruit monsters to your team, but using them in battles is more of a novelty in my opinion. The best reason to capture them is to poach them for that sweet illegal fur trade. Yeah, you can kill your monster pets for rare items. It's cool, but not completely necessary. During the course of the game, you'll also fight and recruit some special human units that have really neat abilities. Agrius brings you some sweet sword skills that hit enemies for big damage at a range. Mustadio only has 3 special abilities, but the ability to instantly disable an opponent from across the map with his gun is incredibly useful. Rafa and Malik lets you randomly hit spots around the enemy and do no real damage. Okay, those two are crap. I made them regular human jobs instead. Malik makes a great archer. And then the notorious game-breaking character Siddelfas Orlandu, or TG Sid, shows up and completely decimates everyone with his sword skills. You can actually rely a lot on these special characters to carry you through the end parts of the game pretty easily, but I like to build up my generic units. During this playthrough, I used a knight who had punch skills, which is pretty standard, but he was a powerhouse. A black mage, or a wizard as the PS1 version calls him, with the samurai draw-out ability, which actually uses the magic stat, so he could walk up to a group of enemies and kill them in one shot. Seriously, the samurai sucks as a unit, but his skill in the right job is killer. A ninja with stealing abilities, which again is kinda standard, and a white mage with the OP math skills, which allows her to hit units instantly with magic, without using MP. My main character Ramza just wielded 2 knight swords as a squire with punch arts. Pretty standard really, but the punch arts allow him to raise dead units and do some supplementary healing if necessary. Customizing your units is the main draw to this game in my opinion. I have no problem grinding away at random battles just to get what I want out of my job skills. It's a ton of fun either way, and almost never gets old. Just accumulate your way to victory while you queue up for dungeons as a DPS on Final Fantasy XIV. Non-relevant joke. I enjoy the graphics of Final Fantasy Tactics over any of the other PS1 era games. The sprite work is masterful. These guys are so well animated it blows the polygonal mess of 3D Final Fantasies away. The marching in place in battle is great, I don't care what you say. And the cutscenes are so well put together that these sprites come to life, when they do things like stab people in the back or kick them in the face. Yeah, violence! The 3D rendered maps look great as well. While they do look a little grainy on modern displays, on the CRTs the game was designed for, they look crisp and super detailed. And if the graininess gets to you, you can always play the versions of Tactics on a mobile device, where Square Enix updated the graphics to look great on those mobile displays. Just overlook the magic abilities not syncing up with their sound effects. On the PS1 version, all the magical effects look and sound great. Play any of the other versions, however, and things just start getting kinda weird. Like the effects are way too slow on the PSP, or sped up way too much on iOS or Android to the point where the sound is still playing after the effect is over. It's a bit jarring, but not enough to not play those ports. As for the music, whoa! I mean, some of the best tracks in the series, if not in video games. Everything is orchestrated and sounds amazing. The tracks are all fit for a fantasy political thriller and for battles involving stabbing other humans to death. It's one of the very few original soundtracks that I tracked down to buy a physical copy of. I just want to know why this music is 2 discs long, while the game itself only fits on 1 CD. It's gotta be the sound quality. Final Fantasy Tactics is a classic, one of the best games in the entire series, even if it isn't an official numbered entry. What's really cool is that Final Fantasy XIV, the giant fan service fest of an MMORPG, even includes a lot of Final Fantasy Tactics references, even so far as to include a whole Bael-filled storyline that mashes up Tactics with Final Fantasy XII in one of the recent updates to the game. It's really cool and even pulls the music directly from the PS1 awesome soundtrack. The game is just as much a main series Final Fantasy game as any others in the series. Ramza was even included in the fighting game Dissidia Final Fantasy. You can't say that about the other spin-off games. Just goes to show you how popular Final Fantasy Tactics is. If you haven't played this gem yet, give it a go. I know that I'm pretty sure a physical copy is only about 20 or 30 bucks. I could be wrong, but it's not that expensive. And the nice thing about it is you can play it on a PS1, a PS2, or a PS3. And you can always also download it on the PSN. I know it's on the PS3 PlayStation Network store, but I'm not sure about the PSP or the PS Vita. However, if you are going to play it on the PSP, I really recommend getting the War of the Lions version. In addition to the beautiful animated cutscenes and the great voiceover work, you also get a couple additional side quests and a couple new jobs. And if you're okay with playing on a phone or a tablet, I'd really recommend trying the iOS or the Android versions. They're actually really good. They even retouched the graphics, so they upped the resolution a bit so they don't look as grainy as they do on the PS1. And aside from the wonky sound effect and magic effect, desynchronization, I guess you could call it, it's a really good port of it. It lends itself to the touch controls of a smartphone or a tablet very, very well. So those are probably my recommended ways to play it, is on a tablet or a smartphone. So maybe next time I'll showcase another great Square RPG like Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger, but right now I'm all about Final Fantasy Tactics. Later.